listen to that, Paul. And of course, as you said, you're working so hard on a daily basis to make sure everything operates smoothly. But the sheriff's office has a lot going on, and I have said the sheriff's department in the past. The sheriff's office, as you highlighted, there's 46 sheriff offices statewide.
Correct. And we do. We have a tremendous amount of work coming through our office on a daily basis, and that's in addition to the plans and projects. We're still trying to build a future. We don't want to be a reactive office. We want to be one that is setting a course for the future that everyone can follow and see clearly the path and make sure that they are comfortable with. And the voters seem to be in approval.
Right.
And as long as they support us, we want to make sure that we're working to please them.
Absolutely. Paul, what's the hardest part of the job for you? Can you gauge that? When you think about it, of course, we want to talk about some of the emotional aspects of the job as well, but when you think back over the last 20 years for you, whether as a police chief, as working there with the Horry County Police Department, or now as the chief deputy for the sheriff's office, what's the hardest part of the job for you?
And I would guess there is a small amount of frustration that is associated with trying to make a difference and falling short. There are so many success stories, and those are the ones that are easiest to focus on, and those are the ones that one kind of builds the career upon. But along that way, along that 20-year path, there were tons of people that I've tried to reach out to, or quite possibly missed an opportunity to reach out to, that fell through the cracks. And I think probably when I look every day, I want to make sure I cover every base and try to accommodate in every way possible, because those folks a lot of times are at the end of their ropes, and they're looking toward us to kind of get them set back on the right track. And I always want to make sure I don't give up too early, or quite possibly in some cases dedicate too much time and miss someone else.
Right.
So it's that balancing act that sometimes is the toughest and most frustrating.
That probably ties into what would then be the most emotional part of the job, that aspect of some of the folks that you feel you could help and even help, but it just not be enough or just not capable of. What would be the most emotional part of the job?
I guess that I think about 20 years ago, the first call I can remember of any substance was going to a house in our local community and having to take their children by court order. They were no longer capable of caring for those children, and we placed those children in custody for whatever abuses and neglect that they were suffering. Well, I happen to have survived long enough in a career that I'm watching the children of those children I took start to fall into the same system.
Boy.
That is the emotional tie that makes me wonder sometimes what more can we do, or how much more should we be doing, because it runs in cycles, and somehow trying to figure out how to break that cycle is a goal that I try to hold closely to.
Right. We got a little less than 10 minutes. Time is flying here on a Thursday morning. Of course, I'm sitting here with you with a gun on your right holster there. Our producer, Sherry Harms, had that idea early this morning just to ask, and I love that question. Have you ever had to expend that gun in the line of duty?
Well, you know, it's one of those things that every day in uniform, it's part of my uniform. It has just as much meaning as the badge I wear or anything else, the car I drive. So it's a part of that uniform.
Right.
I use it every day in that way. I have had situations in the past where people have pointed firearms at me, and I would have been justified in using a deadly force. But I realized that the largest decisions I've had to make in law enforcement were the ones where I have pointed a weapon at someone else. And the next moment I knew that I may be taking their life. I think too many times we trivialize the effect it has on officers to be able to say, shoot or don't shoot. But to me, I can remember so much more vividly the times I've almost had to do that than the time someone almost did that to me.
Right.
It has that type of impact.
So that split second where they've got a gun possibly pointed at you.
Absolutely.
And it looks like in their eyes they're ready to pull the trigger.
And it's one of those things that causes us in law enforcement, the ones who have been here a while, to realize that how unfair it is to second guess so many times.
Right.
It's okay to develop the policies and procedures and go over it with them and expect them to perform at a certain level. But at 3 o'clock in the morning and it's dark out there and it's a scary situation, it's tough to imagine how they feel and what they are up against. And so you always want to make sure you offer the support they deserve during a situation like that, right or wrong.
Right. Paul, we got to talk about the FBI National Academy. I hope you don't mind if we segue off to that, because it really would be I'd be remiss if we didn't get into that just for a few minutes. The National Academy 3 years ago, and I think you highlighted this morning that this is a quarterly event. This takes place every quarter.
That's true. They have 4 sessions a year. They call them sessions. In 1935, J. Edgar Hoover developed the idea that since there was so much interstate crime, that local law enforcement was not fit to do that. We didn't share information or resources, as you might imagine, in 1935 like we do today. So the FBI hosted what they call a National Academy, where police officers are selected, hand-selected. They're chosen to attend. They share information. They network. And they improve their contacts so that they are able to better fight crime. Well, the concept that worked in 1935 works even better today. So I was fortunate enough to be one of 3 chosen to attend from South Carolina, the first ever from the Horry County Sheriff's Office.
So is that right? First ever.
I was proud to represent our office as well as our state. And attended a 10-week course in Quantico, Virginia, that was hosted by the University of Virginia and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, where we studied things like command-level supervision, command-level communication, forensic science, leadership, courses that are in effect today and affect our jobs and will allow us to be better leaders. And I had an awesome experience there.
Oh boy, yeah, and of course one of the fascinating things I saw in the class of 250 from all 50 states, from 29 countries, that you had folks from all over the world, that you were actually hand-selected within that group of 250 students to represent the class on graduation day. Right before Robert Mueller, the head of the FBI, was speaking, you spoke on behalf of the class. How were you chosen out of 250 folks from literally all over the world to do that? That must have been pretty. When
I look at the group, because as I said, 250 officers from around the world, everybody sends who they believe is their best. And to be chosen by that group, to be considered, one of the ones that they thought would be most qualified to do that, was maybe the most humbling of the experiences. The way it works, they have groups of 50. They break us into groups of 50 called sections. And each section chose a class leader. Well, I was fortunate enough to be chosen by my class to be their leader. And about 4 weeks in, they took the 5 leaders and placed us in front of the other 245 attendees. And we gave a 3-minute speech, just kind of an impromptu speech.
Each of the 5.
Of the 5. And then they voted by secret ballot on who they would like to give their graduation remarks. And I'm sure I just squeaked it out because it was so wonderful.
Who were the other 4? Do you remember? Or have you all
I remember very well. They are friends of mine. One of Simon Morgan, who was from Scotland Yard. He's the chief inspector, the real-life Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, come on.
Absolutely. Simon Morgan.
You were going head-to-head with the real-life Sherlock Holmes.
Wow. And he was very talented. He was very good. I think I voted for him. He was that good. We had a guy named Rolf Hose, who is from Germany. They have 16 states in Germany. His is Schleswig-Holstein. He was the colonel of law enforcement in the state of Schleswig-Holstein. He has since been to my home to visit. We've become steadfast friends.
Wow, yes.
He was very talented, gave a very emotional speech about what this country means, not just to us and to him, but to the world. Those people were in awe of the impact we have, and that was nice to hear. Wow. Several other candidates, a colonel out of New Jersey State Police and a sheriff in North Carolina.
Is that right?
All of it.
Right up the street, right up the road, yes.
Yeah, and so it was a competition, but it was very lighthearted, and I was flattered that they chose me to.
You remember, and of course you probably had detailed notes and focused on that for 20 minutes.
Well, notes, that may be a stretch. I'm one that speaks so much more out of emotion than I do from a written script.
Right.
And that day they asked me to submit a speech. I had to do that for approval, anything that was going to be said, on graduation.
That kind of crowd, yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure.
1,000 attendees for our graduation from all over the world. And each of the countries had an embassy representative, so they wanted to make sure it was going to be a proper speech.
Yeah.
They asked me to submit a speech, but I realized when I got up there that day that I had so much more I wanted to share than I had written weeks earlier.
Right.
So it was something that I kind of went on my own, and it worked out fantastically well, and received a lot of attention from it, and brought a lot of attention to South Carolina and to our sheriff's office. So
that's tremendous.
I was proud of being able to do that.
You said about 10 to 12 folks from throughout the state who attend every year.
That's correct.
3 during that session that you were there.
Yes, the waiting list to get in, it's usually about 5 years between the time someone applies and before they're considered for selection.
Right.
And since we had never sent a representative, I had a little more priority, and of course Sheriff Thompson helped me, and several others. The late Chief Sam Hendricks from Conway was the first to bring me an application and say, I believe you would be perfect for this.
Wow.
And I remember him every day that I look at one of those things, that had it not been for him, that possibly wouldn't have happened.
Much like the president and the vice president, if the president died tomorrow, the vice president assumably would be the person, or is the designated appointee. You and Philip, have you ever thought about if anything happened to him, not to even think about that? I hate to think about that on a Thursday morning. But would you ever contemplate stepping out and trying to pursue the office held by your boss?
Well, I said that when I came here from the county police, when he chose me, my loyalty lies totally with him.
Right.
My goal, my only goal, when I arrived, was to make him the sheriff of Horry County as long as he desired.
Right.
That was whether it was 4 years or 40 years.
Right.
If he ever decides that he no longer wishes to do that, then I will reshuffle my goals. And I hope that I've done a good enough job that people would want me to continue on with what he started. But I view that certainly as an extension of his work. And as long as he has that type of approval, and I'm learning every day and trying to do the best I can, I found, that the harder I work for him, the less I have to worry about me.
Right.
And so it's not one of those things I think a lot about. I actually hope that he stays in like Strom Thurmond did, and I can lead him around and introduce him to people and just keep him going as long as he desires.
Those are great words. I'm sure he enjoys that. Paul, thanks so much for being with us this morning. I'm sorry we've run out of time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Happy celebration tomorrow. Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Chief Deputy Paul Butler of the Horry County Sheriff's Office. Coming up. We've never had a guest on the show, a father of 2 daughters, who'd get off without highlighting his 2 girls, and Paul's the same thing. He wouldn't let me get off without highlighting Emily, age 13, and Holly, age 6. He highlighted his beautiful bride of 15 years, Cheryl, in their 15th anniversary just last Thursday, a lifelong member of Ainer United Methodist Church. The focus was here on promoting his boss and promoting his 20 years of law enforcement service. We ran out of time and couldn't highlight his 2 years in Europe and the experiences therein. We ran out of time, but time's not running out on Paul Butler. Tomorrow, 20 years of law enforcement service, and now as Chief Deputy of the Horry County Sheriff's Office. Give him a call, celebrate 20 years and 20 more years plus to come. Paul, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
It's been fantastic.